Welcome to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, ChiroThin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, Angela Pearson, author of I'm Not Contagious, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 161 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your co-host, Luke Millette. Here's your host, Jim Chester.
Hey everybody, so today we had the opportunity of interviewing Stanton Hom, and if you want to know more about growing up in a mechanistic school and developing deep philosophical roots, stay tuned. So, this is Dr. Stan Hom. You're coming in today from California, and we are coming in here. The Chiro Hustle team is coming in from Colorado. And yeah, man, it's great to have you.
Oh, man, it's an honor to be here. I've been listening for a while. And
the hustle's real, right?
What's that?
The hustle's real.
The hustle's real, man. You guys do it really good too. You know, I love the authentic stories. I love the good, like down to earth, but at the same time, very fired up, like interviews. I love it.
Yeah, you know, it's back to like when you were in college doing the TikTok, you know, or when the students are in school, they have to like talk the tick.
Exactly right.
How long have you been out of school doing chiropractic?
So this is my 10th year. Actually, no, this is my 11th year. April 17, 2010 was when I graduated. So I just started my 11th year in practice. Been down in San Diego basically the entire time. Yeah. Really
cool, man. So this is my 11th year of working in chiropractic also.
Oh, right on, man. High five.
So we got in at the same time. I joined when I was 30. How about you?
Around the same. Yeah, I think my 30th birthday was my last year, so I'm 41 as well. I think you said you're 40. Yeah. You got 10 years more of adjustments than I do, man. So
we'd have played on the same sports teams.
What's that?
We'd have played on the same sports teams.
That's awesome.
So in Chiro Hustle fashion, we always like to ask the first question is, what is your story, and what got you influenced to become a chiropractor?
Yeah, I owe that all to my brother. My brother's a chiropractor in North County, San Diego. I got out of the Army in 2005. I graduated West Point in 2000, did 5 years of service, did a year in Iraq. Fun fact is our unit covered down on the city where Saddam was captured. And so basically our unit was like not the guys who caught Saddam, because those were like the elite of the special ops, but we were the teams that basically locked down the city so that they could actually come in. But I got out in 2005. I drove from Fort Hood, Texas, all the way to San Diego, showed up my brother's door, and without like, how do I say this? He basically looked at me and was like, "Are you okay, dude?" You know, I was like, what do you mean am I okay? Right? Like he obviously at the time, I didn't know what he was talking about, but obviously now, you know, 11 years into chiropractic, I could tell he could see challenges in my health that I didn't necessarily know I was experiencing. And so I had chronic gut problems, chronic stress, chronic pain, and, you know, mild forms of PTSD and a lot of those different challenges. And I didn't really know it. Like I was part of a unit, an Army unit that always prided itself on just being exceptionally fit. And, you know, we saw fitness and health as synonymous. So if you could bench press 350 pounds, if you could squat 315 and you can run in the 12-minute 2-mile, you're healthy, you know? And my brother, I still have the book on my front office shelf. It's a book that's actually written by a chiropractor and it's called In Fitness and in Health. And I read that book and it changed my life. And I moved in with him. I became his patient and was religious about my adjustments and all the recommendations he made. And in 6 weeks, I felt like, well, my generation, the old school Nintendo, you push that reset button, the whole screen shifts. Like, I felt like the reset button hit. I was like, dude, I feel like I'm 17 again and I could go back into boot camp. And 6 months later, he told me that I was his healthiest patient. And so for me, it wasn't that miracle one adjustment that took away my asthma forever or my migraines forever. It was a slow roll and actually reversing chronic illness that I had developed as an extremely fit veteran by the age of 26. And so for me, I saw that, I witnessed it, I felt it. I saw my brother, he was only in his second or third year in practice. So he was super pumped about everything, chiropractic. And for me, that stayed with me. And I told him, I was like, I don't know if I want to go to chiropractic school because I love being a patient so much. And so I just stuck around San Diego for a couple of years. And then after a while, he was like, dude, I think it's time, man. You got to go to school. And so he took me to a master circle seminar. I think it was either right before I started first trimester or within the first few weeks of first trimester. And so I saw Dan Murphy, John DeMartini, Pat Gentempo, Bob Hoffman, a lot of those greats in my first trimester going into LACC, which is obviously not the mecca of chiropractic philosophy. And so, that's basically it. From there, the history is going through school and being in practice.
So, question that sparks my attention is, I also lived with a chiropractor when I was working in a clinic. How long did you live with your brother as you were coming back from the service?
Let's see. I moved in with him in 2005. I started school. I got back here around, I ETS'd in May 2005 is when I got out. And I started school January 2007. So almost 2 years.
Okay. So would you say that living with your brother had a profound impact on everything that spurred from military service to becoming the chiropractor?
I would say it would have been drastically. I would say, yeah, it was like full immersion, right? Like back then, Whole Foods wasn't everywhere. I could even rewind a little bit. My brother sent me 3 books while I was deployed in Iraq. He sent me Total Health by Joe Mercola, a applied kinesiology chiropractic book. I can't remember the author. And then an acupuncture book. Because he was like, whatever, you're going to go into something health-wise. And for me, I got back to Fort Hood, and because I was the chef in my household, like my 5 Army roommates, like basically I cooked for them. So I basically monopolized buying good food because I read Mercola's book. I drove an hour and a half every weekend to Whole Foods, which I believe was the only Whole Foods in the country at the time. And so I'd drive to Austin from Fort Hood every weekend with an ice chest and I'd come back with healthy food. And so I'd say it started then, but I didn't see the kind of miraculous changes until I lived with my brother. And so my brother took me to Ocean Beach. I bought a used surfboard, and he basically took me out like one of the first weekends. So I'd surf like 2 to 4 times a day. We lived 2 blocks from Whole Foods. I remember the old school yoga DVD that he was like, dude, we've never done yoga. Like, I've never done yoga. Let's try yoga. And like, it's like an hour and a half of like Rodney Yee, like the old school Gaiam ones. Like he's like literally in a blue Speedo and, long. And you're like, this is kind of weird watching this, but somehow it's working, We used to go to our buddies or his buddies' karate studio, and he would teach us yoga and meditation and stuff like that. And so it was like a full-on immersion of the innate lifestyle that if I didn't have that, I don't know that I would have had the miraculous change so quickly. It would have happened. It just wouldn't have happened so fast.
What an awesome story, man.
Yeah.
And, like I can parallel that a bit too. By me living with the chiropractor and working in a clinic, I got immersed in it too. And I started realizing that chiropractic, the patients all had these like amazing stories. And I was like, man, this is like the best like kept secret in the world. Why don't know more people know about like what they call the power of chiropractic?
Yeah.
The clinics see it, the brick and mortar sees it, the practitioners see it, but where can people find out more about the profession? So that's when I met Luke, and I'm like, hey man, we need to make a film on chiropractic so we can tell this story to the people that are at home watching documentaries, and they're like, exploring healthier lifestyles. And we're like, well, how can we get this like message indoctrinated to more people? Well, at that point, documentaries were super popular. They still are. But this is when like the rise of documentary was starting to become like the new, if we can take something from where we are today, the new normal.
Right.
People were more interested in researching. They're more interested in healthy habits and healthy lifestyles. So I was like, look, we need to capitalize and make something that tells the chiropractic story. And I learned that from being immersed in the chiropractic lifestyle as well.
Yeah. And when you're in practice, even 11 years in, like patient education and like affirming their choices and affirming their results and reminding them oftentimes, like I have a patient that comes in and, she'll say like, hey, my daughter has this thing with her knee or her shoulder. And you're like, dude, she came in with tics and deep rooted anxiety, and she couldn't leave the house without knowing where the next bathroom was because she didn't know she was going to pee herself. Like I get like your shoulder and the knee, and I'm going to help, of course, but let's not also forget where you came from, and it's one of those things. Chiropractic amnesia is something that I believe is rampant in all practices. And I think for me as a doc, like it's always just reaffirming. It's like, dude, you come so far, like you've already had so many amazing miracles. And on our end, they become sometimes like, I don't want to call it like, it's never business as usual. Right. But they're so frequent that it's like, it's almost like it is. It's like, oh yeah, that went away. Oh yeah, that boy with autism, he's speaking now. Oh yeah, he said I love you to his mom for the first time. That's pretty amazing. And you're like, you have to like really just sit back. Like that would actually never happen in a conventional medical office unless it was absolutely random, right? I used to tell a lot of young docs, like, you're nervous about, especially coming from LACC and a lot of the different more like mechanistic schools. It's like, you're definitely afraid of being a chiropractor, but like on our worst day, we are far safer and we're far more effective at helping the body heal itself than any other profession that actually exists right now. We're far safer on our worst day. Like on their best day, conventional medicine, like what is it, like 120,000 people like for properly prescribed drugs or something like that? Like it's insane. Like we should celebrate every day, play like the most pump up music every day going into the office, because on our worst day we do far better than they could ever do on their best day.
I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying there. And one of the things I want to kind of elaborate on is this idea of it's kind of pain amnesia. It's not just chiropractic practice amnesia. It's like when people start getting healthy and better, they forget that what they originally came in for.
100%.
It's a blur because half the time they come in with some type of chronic case that they're like, hey man, can you help me out? And you're like, let's do some exam. Let's do an x-ray. Let's do a report on you and see what's going on. And then I'll tell you if I can help you.
Right.
And then they
go, they get their result. They get that first initial goal, and sometimes so fast, but then they go back to the TV and they go back to the mainstream media and they go back to the commercials and they get back indoctrinated with all the different things that they could potentially have. It's like, oh yeah, I have that other symptom. And then you focus on that. You forget about that miracle that just actually happened, right?
And that's just the power of chiropractic once again, and being a healer and taking care of people. It's an honorable message that you guys carry and what you guys perform. And, really, like, I always kind of say this to people. I'm like, man, if there's a doc with like money problems, I don't want them adjusting me. But when you think about like what docs get to do though, is when they are intentional and they are in a great flow state and they are like training their bodies and eating well and have healthy relationships. I want that person administering care to me.
But I would even say that even the worst freaking chiropractic adjustment is better than best drug. Like the most poverty mindset, victim mentality, like scared as hell to adjust you, I would say is still better. Like I would take that any day. Like my patient asked me, when's the last time you took a drug? I'm like, and when's the next time you? I'm like, I don't know if I don't know if I ever will. I don't know if I'll be totally fine. Like our baby was born 9 months ago at home. And one of the things our midwife asked us, one of the first questions was like, why home birth? And I was like, not to say that I'm trying to go away from a negative, but I will be perfectly fine, knock on wood, if I never step foot in a hospital again. Perfectly fine, ever in the history of my life, for my own reason, right? I've done hospital calls. I adjusted a patient, that was on bed rest for pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll be totally fine if I never take a drug and if I never go to the hospital again. And that's not being dogmatic. That's just being respectful of what I know my body's capable of, knowing my own history and knowing how I've already healed from pretty chronic stuff. Yeah, like I burned this arm. I fell asleep house sitting for my brother once with a large cup of tea, hot tea, wearing a sweatshirt, and it spilled on my arm. And it burned like basically from here. And it was so bad. My sister-in-law, who's a DO, she's a family practice, conventionally trained medical doctor. And she had to debride it all, right? It's disgusting. She's like, you're so, like, you won't take ibuprofen. I'm like, give me 5 shots of tequila. I'll get more out of that. I'll feel better. And I'm not dogmatic. I just know what that stuff does. And I know also tequila is not the best thing for you, but it's also probiotic. But at the same time, the long and short is like, I'd rather do that, right? I got stung by a stingray a couple years ago. And my wife was like, you're crazy. Like, you won't take like anything? I'm like, no, I'm going to get home and I'm going to I'll do like 2 shots and I'm going to be set for the night, Is that an alcoholic? No, 2 shots, we're good,
Well, I think it flows back to what Reggie Gold said about the adjustments is he likened it to sex. He's like, even when you get an adjustment and it's bad, it's still good. And it's like anytime you get sex, even if it's bad, it's still good.
Right? Like it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, so for me, it's like, there was an episode where somebody was talking about the analysis, right? Like the art of what we do. Like we should always be like optimizing our ability to analyze and understand, like we were talking before we started recording, like measuring as objectively as possible all those things that are potential interference patterns that could lead to problems long before they've actually presented with problems. And for me, it's like, I think that same way, we should do that. But if you didn't, like I have friends that are classmates and some of them only do PI and we run into each other every once in a while. I'm going to be like, no, you're not going to adjust. Don't adjust me, man. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'll adjust you. You adjust me. Let's see where we're at, Well, and I'll take that any day,
Chiropractors are architects of health. And what you guys do is you reverse engineer what's gone on in somebody to get them back to a level of more functionality, if you will. Right. And I think that when somebody comes in presenting symptoms, you're like, well, I don't cure anything. But I am going to see where you have a pattern where you have a subluxation and you're stuck, and I'll correct that. And when I correct that, now we're going to have an impact on your nervous system, which has an impact on your whole capability of healing. But that's the truth of it is like, you're like, well, I don't help with the shoulder, but I'll check and see where you have a subluxation and I'll correct that and we'll see what happens.
Chiropractic doesn't heal. I don't heal. But have you guys ever heard of the Institute of Noetic Sciences? You guys ever heard of that? So if you Googled that and you Googled spontaneous remission, they have a downloadable PDF that is thousands of pages of all the spontaneous placebo-based healings that have happened. And they are the most chronic stuff, like neoplasm, stage 4 cancers, all these things. And it's like, no, I don't know if chiropractic can heal you. I would say that it doesn't. But I would say that there is not one disease on the planet that the body has not figured out how to heal yet. And if that's true, then let's do whatever it takes to help the body do what it's made to do the best way that it can, right?
Amen.
It's one of those things where, I was a little bit late with you guys because we have a 6-year-old in our practice, chronic migraines, daily migraines since 8 months ago, right? When he came to me, 12 medications. Who puts a freaking kid on 12 medications? And to the point where he's been through every test, he's had a spinal tap, which caused a hematoma from T2 all the way down to S2. And he was going through these myelopathic convulsions. And they're like, oh, we're not certain that it caused compression on the cord. I'm like, no, that's a clear indicator of cord compression. He was having really major problems and they should have caught it, and because they're wondering if there's malpractice and things like that. And on my end, I'm like, it's malpractice in our profession to tell someone that it's just about pain, right? It's borderline malpractice to shirk the possibility and the actually biological fact that innate is not only real, innate is working biologically in a directive to heal your system and adapt and survive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365, just not always at 100% because something's interfering with it, right? And it just so happens we know one of the best ways to determine how that system is interfered with. But it's always working.
Optimizing vitality.
That's it.
So, do you have any favorite motivational quotes or mantras that you hang on your wall or that you keep in your wallet, or anything to remind yourself of why you love what you do?
There's a couple of them, man. I would say one is from Joe Dispenza, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's in the age of information, ignorance is a choice. That's one. And then kind of paired with that is one from DeMartini, that's wisdom is the instantaneous recognition that crisis is a blessing. And for me, I love those quotes because for me, on a day-to-day basis, it's freaking heartbreaking to have parents come in front of you and basically plead to you, like, please help my child. And to be able to stand there with enough certainty and belief, not just in myself and in chiropractic, but also in him, right? He's the hero more than anyone. The hero inside of him, that innate inside of him, is what's most important. And I have to stand there and realize that all this crap that he's been through is actually the fuel that we're going to need to actually help him heal himself as optimally as possible. And so it's it can get really dark, especially when you take care of kids, especially when you take care of pregnant patients in our community, especially now with COVID, in New York, where husbands aren't allowed in some of the births or weren't allowed in for some of the births. And now we have one baby who's in the NICU and only one person can go at a time. So his little brother, his older sister hasn't been able to actually visit him yet. It gets pretty tough, man. But that just also just fuels how much people need you, the world, the darker it gets out there, the more it fuels our purpose. The void of chiropractic out there actually creates a value for it because we actually have to serve more the darker it gets, right? And so those are things that I love. I love those quotes because I think with Dispenza, it's at this stage, there's so much dang information. You guys provide so much good content. One, if chiropractors aren't fired up, that's a problem, right? Because there's more information today than when I was going through school. I am so grateful for one of my upper class students. She walked up to me and put into my chest James Chestnut's interview on purpose. And I was like, what is this? She's like, listen to it. And I just listened. And then the next one was Dan Murphy. The next one was Jen Tempo. And I just kept getting all these, if I didn't have a freaking CD that then I put into my computer, that then I put onto my iPod, that then went into my headphones, now there's no excuse not to be the most fired up, chiropractic student or you have so many interviews that me, 11 years in, I'm like, dude, that was freaking awesome, man. I don't even know who this guy is. Like, who is this guy? You know, like, and it's like not all the celebrities, but you listen, you're like, that's it. I love that. Like, I love that story. Brian Polachek, second generation. You hear it and you're like, dude, I need to meet this guy. Because he just said what I say in 50 words in 5. And I appreciate that because I overcomplicate things all the time, right?
That dude's fired up, right?
I love that guy, man. I don't know. I have no idea who he is. No concept of who he is, but I'm grateful for his interview.
Yeah, Brian's crazy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We all have to be a little bit, right? Or
So
a lot.
how do you think the world would change if everyone got under consistent chiropractic care?
Have you guys read or looked at the chiropractic textbook ever? Probably not as patients, right?
No.
D.D. Palmer?
No, chiropractic textbook was written by Stevenson in 1927. And in his, it was going to be like a curriculum for chiropractic schools. It's broken down to freshman, sophomore, junior, senior text. And in the end, it goes through like the advanced like concepts behind chiropractic. Obviously, these is what they were trying to teach students in the time. But one of those paragraphs and chapters is called BJ's Utopia. And when BJ said he wanted to clear the insane asylums, and when BJ said like the level of vibration and consciousness would rise because of chiropractic, like I'm so freaking grateful for the practice that I have. Like being able to take care of families. One of our moms delivered this year, 4th baby with us. She was the first pregnant mom I ever took care of when I was in my own private practice. She's had 4 babies with us. And our office manager had her 3rd with us. And my doula had her 2nd with us, you know, and what I see, and this is also like, I'm potentially not going to see in my family because my daughter was obviously adjusted at birth and, you know, like, she will be adjusted for the rest of her life. But you can see even in 4 kids or 3 kids or 2 kids, like the earlier that child was checked and adjusted, the more attuned and highly vibrant their nervous system is. The better I got as a chiropractor, the better their adjustments were, the better their nervous system was functioning and vibrating. And so for me, I'm grateful because I get to see it already. And that during this COVID challenge, yes, there are some patients that didn't come in. Most of them were a little bit newer and had not been educated or indoctrinated, whatever you want to call it, right, into the culture. But those that have been here for years, like they ask me, like, what the heck is this thing for? Like, why do we need this? And I'm like, great question. Let's keep talking about that. And they're more fired up than I am about all the stuff that's going on in California. And so for me, the world would change instantaneously if everybody were checked and adjusted. I would say we'd have a bigger problem because we don't have enough chiropractors.
You made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession. This week's episode is brought to you by Imaging Services, Chirothin, Chiro Moguls, Mahalo Wellness, McCaffrey's Clinical Mentoring, Local Gold, Chiro Health USA, The Goodman Factor, Chiropractic Rocks, Winner's Edge, Accident Records, Chiro Tax Pro, Full Script, your online dispensary, Angela Pearson, author of I'm Not Contagious, and Digital Hustle. Let's hustle.
Like, we don't have nearly enough chiropractors today to be able to take care of the world, much less San Diego. San Diego is 3.3 million people, and we have people fighting over who, you know, like, it's overpopulated. It's like, no, it's not. It's not. There are not enough of us. If you change your mindset to realizing that we need more chiropractors that understand the depth of what we do, then we might even achieve that goal. And that goal, I believe BJ was spot on. I think they understood that way back when. And I think that it's one of those things where now you can see it on social media. You can see it on YouTube. You can see all these different master classes on things that align with what we do. What I believe is the number one thing that's always missing is us. Because one, there's not enough of us, and there's not enough of us that speak up, and there's not enough of us that actually do the work that they were trying to teach. Right?
Well, I think there's a higher level of necessity for chiropractors to not just be in practice. And that's already a huge,
That's a good point.
that's already a huge job. And then you're like, hey, we need to be more unified. We need to be more congruent. We need to we need to be a bigger version of ourselves, because going to work and raising a family isn't enough. And there's a huge pair of shoes that chiropractors have to wear.
Well, and you have a kid, right? Like my daughter's 9 months old, and then I don't really like staying late on Fridays as much as I used to. I don't like staying late because I don't want to miss bedtime and those types of things. But what it's made me do was be more communicative of like, hey, this patient came in. I tell my wife, and she's obviously a believer in what we do, and she's obviously somebody that's bought into everything, in terms of like the entire like natural and innate lifestyle. But it's one of those things that I now have to be more communicative about the cases that come in, because it's like, holy cow, like these kids are sick. These patients are in really tough spots, and it means that I am needed. And it's a huge privilege that our family has been, our daughter's been check and adjusted since birth, and she will be adjusted for the rest of her life, and it's one of those things that it's crazy to think about, right? It's crazy to think about what the world would be like. And it's also like at this stage, we're needed now more than ever. If you're not fired up for COVID or the fallout of COVID, right? Like, I don't know if I shared this with you, Jim, but I posted recently that one of my West Point friends, like he graduated a year behind me, his son, 12 years old in quarantine, took his life. Took his own life, man. And he knows with 100% certainty, if his son was in school, that he'd be alive today. And he is getting, some backlash because how dare you talk about like putting people at risk and the COVID and the virus. And it's like, wow, the number one question at this stage is this virus deadly? And if it's not, business as usual, we got to go back. We have to go back. We have to restore all these different, whether it's freedoms or going back to work, restore the economy, because 1% increase in unemployment is 40,000 deaths. That's public health, right? And chiropractors have a mind that says, you made this choice, you locked down the whole world, you shut down the economy, but we know that domino affects infinite number of dominoes that create deep-rooted subluxation patterns that are going to be chronic. And that's going to echo into the future in chronic subluxation patterns, chronic interference patterns. And then does that mean that we should be cowering and frustrated and in poverty and a victim? Or should we freaking man and woman up and actually start serving more than we ever have? I'm excited to see which chiropractors thrive in this situation, because it's going to be directly related to their purpose.
Well, a lot of what you're saying goes back to the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, toxins. And when people are experiencing high levels of stress, the silent killer, now they are experiencing what you said, this entrenched long-term subluxation pattern that's based on the chemical and the emotional stressors.
Of course. Have you heard the 4 T?
Technology,
yeah.
Yeah, man. Actually, they're dubbing it as nursing home posture.
Oh, interesting.
Because people that assimilate how they use their technology, same posture that people look like they have when they're in nursing homes. Digital dementia is another one.
Yeah, I did an x-ray on a 40-year-old guy the other day. I saw the worst reverse cervical curve I've ever seen. I was like, dude, what are you doing, man? I was like, this is not an option. You take care of this. Figure it out. You got it, finances, whatever. Yes, your baby is important. Yes, your postpartum wife is important. But that curve, we got to fix that curve,
Well, even CBP research shows that people that have kyphosis in the cervical spine have 15 years less of life expectancy than people with normal cervical sagittal planes.
I'm gonna look that up.
And, you know, for every inch forward, we lose, I think it's 15 to 30% of our vital lung capacity. So when people are like out here like this, man, and they're like this all day, basically all they're doing is shutting their lungs down. And lungs have an impact on what? Your pulmonary system, which has an effect on your everything, man. Like the whole body pumps through this.
Right.
And the like you're saying, man, a reverse curve up in the cervical spine. Hey, man, that's as they say in Spanish, no bueno.
That's awesome.
So the way things are going right now, where do you see the profession heading in the next 20 years?
I see the profession, I see the chasm getting bigger. And I see it getting bigger because I believe that one side, I mean, this is me coming from a rather mechanistic school, and they're pretty clear, you know, they have a PA program and things like that. One of the young docs I mentor, he left school because they have a sharps container in the adjusting room, which is, you know, apparently they deliver vaccines in the clinic, right? Because they're PAs. And I don't see that train stopping for them, right? And on the other end, like we have, I'm not going to get less convicted over what I do over the next 10 and 20 years, right? Like 20 years from now, when I'm 61, I want to be like one of the most fired up chiropractors. Like one of my new account asked me, like, when do you think you retire? I'm like, honestly, if this thing is working, you know, which it will be, because I'm going to stay adjusted, I'm going to stay moving, I'm going to do all the work to take care of myself. I don't think I will, you know, not from private practice because I love it so much. But with that said, that divide is going to get bigger. And I don't know what that looks like for the profession. I don't know what those wars are going to look like. I don't know what the undercutting politics are going to look like. I don't know what the academia is going to look like in the future. I really don't. I wish I did. But what I know for a fact is that 20 years from now, the principles of chiropractic are going to be so far more accepted. Because if you think about even my time, like I was learning yoga on a DVD, you know, like, and I had to be given like MP3 CDs that I had to, you know, put onto my iPod. Not even MP3, I had to convert them right into MP3. And now, like, you look at what's out there, like people are already making that shift. Last year at Epic Impact, Tony Ebel spoke about how for kids, yoga and meditation went up, right? The use in 1 year went up like significantly. The use of chiropractic went down like 0.1%. He took it personally, right? Because he's been one of the top, you know, pediatric chiropractors in the world for that long. And so I think for us, those principles are going to continue to go on, and the mission is always going to be there because for whatever reason, one, we don't own our own purpose and our own power to actually push it into and inspire the populace to actually come to see us more. But then secondarily, we don't have enough chiropractors being trained in the model of that vitalistic model that would be more, you know, in my opinion, in alignment with those universal principles that are moving forward. But to me, it makes me more excited than ever. And it's kind of cliche, best time to be a chiropractor, but it is, because it's getting darker and darker out there, and people are innately looking for something different. And they know, you ask every patient, how many drugs do you want to be on? You're like, none. I don't want to be on any. I'm like, well, then why would you go? What other result is there to go into a hospital or to go into a medical doctor outside of them saying either nothing's wrong, where, hey, things are not bad, or they are bad and here's a drug? Like, what other reason is there to go? That said, medicine saved my life 3 times. I'll be eternally grateful for that for the rest of my life. It's where they're best. But every other case, man, send them to us, right?
Well, I think what you're saying is similar to like how lawyers get designation as they go through their trainings. Like, yeah, I'm going to go on the track and I'm going to be this type of attorney. And sadly to say that, that's what might happen to the designations of the chiropractic profession. Like, yeah, I practice chiropractic medicine. Like that, like there might be docs that are actually proud to say that someday. So,
docs that are proud to say that now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a misnomer. Like, how crazy can you be to say I practice chiropractic medicine? Like, makes me want to run my face into a wall when I see that on somebody's like LinkedIn profile. I'm like, I can't be your friend.
Which is it?
Do you practice chiropractic or do you practice medicine? Are you like, you're one of the most educated people in the world. 1% of the world population are doctors. Are you confused?
And it's an unfortunate thing because they might not see the difference, because how could you know?
And then the judgmental Mick from Iowa saying, saying, how confused can you be?
Yeah. I wonder what happens, right? Like, I wonder what happens in a purely pain-based mechanistic office. And it happens all the time where a patient will come in and they'll be like, dude, am I supposed to take 5 dumps this morning? I was like, what do you mean? You're like, I took 5 dumps this morning. And you're like, were they loose? Like, was it diarrhea? Like, no, they were like full on, like really good poops, man. I'm like, you didn't even tell me you're constipated, dude. He's like, yeah. I mean, I just didn't think it was important or whatever. And you're just like, what happens? Because it happens. It happens in a mechanistic office. They'll be like, oh, there's no research to say that it was the adjustment that caused that. Do they go into that? I don't know. But what if they do know? That's what frustrates me. This book right here, it's green. Have you guys ever heard of a guy named Joseph Jancy?
No.
No one ever does on the vitalistic side. He was the founder, or not, I don't think he was the founder, but he was one of the longest standing presidents of National College. You read this book, and I've read a lot of it, and it's more, I would say, academic than green books and things like that. But you read this book, and you have no clue. You have no clue at all that he, is from a college other than Life or Sherman or whatever, right? Because back then, this was written in, 1947, the year of my dad's birth. Written in 1947, chiropractic back then, everybody was subluxation based. Everybody believed in subluxation. Have you guys ever interviewed Simon Senzon?
Not yet.
Dude, you guys got to interview Simon. Simon knows more about the history of chiropractic in a whole picture model. He knows more about the theory and the facts and the evolution of subluxation theory than anybody on the planet. He's written 10 published articles in a row, 10-part series, the same paper, going through the entire history of subluxation. You read books like this. I put it on my shelf, 1, because I've read it, 2, because there's some really good clinical value in it, but 3, kind of because he's not BJ. And his school and my school, LACC, were hijacked in the 80s when the whole CCE, I don't know if you guys have learned about that drama in the past, education. The modern mechanistic chiropractors, the modern allopathic chiropractors, I believe these guys are turning over in their graves. They're the people that their lineage they came from, because they believed in subluxation. They believed in us as a different path outside of conventional medicine. And they completely hijacked it.
Well, what you're saying, Dr. Stan, is we sold out the principle for a few pieces of gold. And that's really what the education system did, is they sold it out for a few buildings to be built.
Yeah.
And now what we have to do is basically go out and take heads and put people into these schools and put vitalism back into the schools again. And I think
it's pretty remarkable, because you talk to some of the students from a lot of the mechanistic schools, and sometimes I have to speak to them almost in dude, you practice yoga every day. Why? Because it releases intersegmental problems in your low back? No, you freaking believe in prana. You believe in breath. You believe that there's a mind-body connection, why don't you believe also that chiropractic is a vehicle in that? Like, it's crazy to me that it's like, it is such an inherent discrimination. And for me, I've read so many books from chiropractors who came from CMCC, who came from Cleveland, LA, who were like such like pioneers for like innate and subluxation. They just loved to talk more academic. And that's what it was back then. It was like the simplistic explanations versus the academic docs. And now it's like, that doesn't even exist. Like, it doesn't even exist on those campuses. Like, when we were taught philosophy, I'm grateful when I was taught the 33 principles in one day through a like kind of very cynical professor, that night was DCS, Pat Gentempo, teaching 33 principles. Still one day, but it was like, it went way into the late nights. And it was just like, dude, how do we have a whole curriculum and a whole education process that is completely devoid of what like would inspire everybody, you know? It's crazy. Sorry, that was a little fiery.
No, it's perfect. You're going in the direction it's necessary. And I think a lot of people are going to listen to your episode and they're going to be like, wow, those dudes were, back to what you said, on purpose. Those dudes were on fire.
Both sides of the profession on fire back in the day for subluxation, for the body healing itself. They just didn't like each other, you know? It's crazy.
So what books are you in the middle of reading right now? What podcasts do you like? And what are some of your hobbies?
Chiro Hustle is a pretty awesome podcast that I heard of once. Let's see. Books that I'm into right now, I'm a relatively new dad, so I'm reading 7 Habits for Highly Effective Families. I've read Stephen Covey's work in the past, and he translates that into families, and I freaking love this book because it's reminding me of all the things that I learned from my own personal growth, but breathing that into my family. I'm reading a book by a guy named Ryan Holiday. It's called Ego is the Enemy. I read one of his books earlier this year called The Obstacle is the Way. And he's kind of a stoic guy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like stoicism through like Tim Ferriss and those guys. My favorite podcasts are, we're just stuck in this whole health freedom movement. So Highwire with Del Bigtree is probably one of my tops. It's always on repeat on my playlist. Vaccine Conversation with Melissa Floyd and Bob Sears is another one. Chiropractic wise, obviously you guys. I love listening to the Chiropractic Philanthropists. I've followed Ed for a long time, kind of outside looking in. Now get to, train with him on the Inner Circle as of a couple months ago. Let's see, another book. Let's see, chiropractic wise, recently I'm reading a book called The Complete Chiropractor. It's one of Simon Senzon's publications. That's why I'm fired up about this, because this doc was staff, like dean of like CMCC, clinic director, CMCC, also taught at Life, taught at Cleveland, LA, but was classically trained on the mechanistic model. And then he saw, like in real time, like he would write articles about the ingenious trap of medicine is diagnosis treatment. Like when we get into conventional medicine or integrating into this healthcare system, it's all a diagnosis treatment model. So it's basically, what disease do you have and how do you treat it? So there's nothing about subluxation. There's nothing about innate intelligence. There's nothing about self-healing. And so this guy, it's like one of the thickest books I've ever read. And half of it is all of his like essays and the things that he's written about. And the other half of it is all his technique. And it's wild because you're reading and he's like talking about reflexes on moving the ear around, on how they affect the suboccipitals and how they can influence how and where you adjust. And I was like, I've never heard that before. I consider myself a very well-read, a very, kind of diverse technique person, from very low force to very, Gonstead-ish to Thompson, et cetera, reflex tests, AKA, et cetera. And like, I was like, I've never heard that before. I'm using that tomorrow. And I love like the fact that like the very next day patients are like, dude, that was a really good adjustment. Like that was so different, but you read it and you're like, this guy was a mechanistic guy. He wasn't BJ. He wasn't, like Joe Strauss. He wasn't all these kind of vitalistic pioneers per se, or the chiropractic celebrities or the legends, but he was. And you read this book and you're like, oh man, I didn't know those guys existed on that side. And it's fun because I come from LACC, right? So I actually want to make myself feel better for coming into chiropractic the way I do, because there's always a little bit of envy, because you're like, dude, that guy went to Life, and Sherman, they have this, and New Zealand, they have this, and Barcelona, they do these crazy breathwork things, and they put students in like sweat lodges and things like that. And you're like, we didn't have that. We had like one day, orientation that had nothing to do with chiropractic, and so anyways.
So what are some websites and social media links if people wanted to learn more about you?
About me? Shoot, that's like to be TBD. That's going to grow. So I have my Instagram. It's like the most inactive social media thing on the planet. So, you can go there if you want to learn more about my family, at Dr. Stanton Hom. My practice is at the Future Gen SD for San Diego. We have a Facebook. I would say if there's anything that I'm most active on is we typically will post videos for the practice multiple times a week, where I'm doing as much patient education as possible, but working with that now. So we're gonna evolve that pretty quick. And so I'm stoked about a podcast coming, and I'm stoked about potentially membership sites and things like that didn't exist before. And so I love the fact that COVID hit and it made me kind of think about how my practice is. I think Ed posted a picture of like somebody with their pants caught down. He's like, some of you may have felt like you were caught with your pants down because we're stuck to our brick and mortar. So that's coming soon. I wish I had more. I say that all the time. I don't do these things to grow a list, yet, but I don't, it's more of just like give from your heart, and you give to serve, and you actually just, I think it comes out more authentic sometimes that way.
Well, it's really cool to see you where you are today. And it's really awesome to hear where you've come in the past 11 years. And thank you for serving to keep our freedoms where they assume to be today. And just really appreciate you, and look forward to interacting with you more in the inner circle. I think your message is going to be received by so many. And we just want to say thank you for being our guest today.
Awesome, man. It's always an honor. I love, like my wife asked me once, when we first started dating, she's like, so if I don't believe in this chiropractic thing, like, it's like, door, like there's no way forward. It's not about religion. It's not about believing. It's like, one, how can you not once you know? But secondarily, it's like, it's something that I love at the deepest part of my being. And it's one of those things for me, when I look back into our history, like I love both sides all the way back. You look back at the original schools that were there. You're like, dude, these guys were fighting like tooth and nail at each other, but they freaking believed in what we did. And they were on fire for promulgating forward their specific theory about what we did. Not whether or not what we do works, or whether it's accepted, or if it's evidence-based or not. It's like, it works, it's going to change the world, and we're going to push it forward in our particular model. I love looking back at that because it makes me feel whole. I don't feel splintered like I did in certain parts of my student career and early parts of my doctor career. I look back at the history. I would love to hear an interview with you guys and Simon Senzon, because he, more than any human. So that's a website that I use. The Tick Institute, the Institute Chiropractic, is the most rich resource on chiropractic history and philosophy. There's no person, in my opinion, on the planet that knows more of all of the richness of our history than him. Yeah. And it's something that I love.
Well,
You're awesome, man.
thanks again for being our guest today. It was a lot of fun, and we want you to enjoy the rest of your evening. All right.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys.
Nice meeting you.
A huge honor. Yeah.
Great chat.
Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.